October 6, 2023. This is a work session relating to the ITD policy complaint filed by Sammy Graham, Daniel Smith, and John Henry. It's an inquiry to understand the methods that were used to create this complaint that the ombudsman has reported appears to have been an effort to overturn an election, or at least to create some question about whether the election was done in a manner that was legitimate and legal. And our efforts are to understand so that we can ensure that it doesn't happen again. And moving forward in future efforts, we will discuss the actual policy proposal, which is addressing IT concerns relating to the election. But now our discussion is about how this policy was made and implemented. So the conversation will be hewed to that point for the time that we have today. I'm going to go ahead and start with introductions. We have
George Martinez.
Zach Johnson.
Karen Bronga.
Scott Myers.
Anna Brawley.
Meg Salto.
Christopher Constant.
Daniel Boland.
On the phone, Mr. Salt.
Randy's here.
All right, thank you very much. We also have counsel, clerk's office. I'm just going to dive right in. Mr. Henry, please come forward.
Come on, counsel.
Welcome. Please state your name for the record. Hey, press the button for the green light to come on. Press it real solid so the green light goes on. There you go.
My name is John Henry.
Thank you. And you're here present with counsel?
I'm here with Mr. Brent Cole.
Your counsel?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right, and
Yes, sir.
your name is what?
Brent.
Brent Cole. We got it. Thanks. But you push that button real hard, it'll turn green. Let it go. No.
Yeah.
There we go.
Brent Cole. I'll master this by the end of it. Sorry.
That's all right. No, that's good. New system. So thank you. Again, the purpose of this inquiry is legislative and fiduciary in nature. Our efforts are to ensure that we have the right system in place and also that we protect that system from abuse. And so I have a series of questions that have been developed for me to walk through, and I'm going to do my best to be as expeditious as possible. We have an hour on the calendar with 55 minutes left. So, and I note for the record that you did submit 2 records to us. One was an email, which was just the shell email with an attached complaint that was filed on 4/19/2022 by Mr. Henry, which was a record that is subject to the subpoena. So thank you for producing the record. So I have a series of questions first about records. The one is, do you have any other records relating to the election complaint that was filed by Ms. Graham on April 11th and presented to the Election Commission on the 20th?
No, I don't.
Thank you. Other than this record, do you have any other records relating to ITD policies?
Any records that I have submitted to my attorney,
Thank
Mr. Brent
you.
Cole.
So I'll just walk through these questions. Do you ever have any records relating to communications with current or former municipal employees about issues related to the 2023 or 2022 elections?
No, I don't, other than what you've been presented.
Thank you. Do you ever have any records relating to the communications with current or former municipal employees and Ms. Graham?
Okay, can you repeat that, please?
Yeah. Do you ever have any records relating to communications with current or former municipal employees and Ms. Graham?
And none with the employees, but I do have communication with Ms. Graham
About this policy?
as an observer.
Okay.
When you say communications, I think what he's referring to is.
Can you turn the mic on? Thank you.
Sorry. When you say communications, I think what he's referring to is verbal.
Right, no,
We have
I meant
no-
records. We're
He has
still on
no
the records.
records.
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
have,
no, it's fine.
I don't have any records.
No, that's great. So that's what I thought from the previous question. So, and you did bring questions or questions, you did bring records. So can you describe to us the record that was presented?
Which record is that?
I'll get it. Just a minute.
Is this 2022?
Yeah,
Yes.
2022.
It's right here.
Yes. Got it. I'll go ahead and read it if you'd like.
No, just a brief.
No, I
just
want to
tell
read
us-
it.
I appreciate you want to read it, but as I
John.
said, just a brief summary. We have a lot of questions.
Go ahead. Yes, that is
Just-
my complaint.
It is, and can you just give us a brief summary of the complaint, not read it?
It's a summary about use or access to the Dominion server in a locked cage authorized by the election folks. And we had a lot of questions over that.
All right, thank you. Perfect. That was sufficient. So regarding the April 11, 2023 complaint that you signed on to, I want to ask some questions about that complaint. You're familiar with it, right?
I am.
And it was submitted that day, signed by you, Sammy Graham, and Daniel Smith, correct?
You're referring to the first portion of it or the last piece? of it?
The 11th complaint, not the April 6th, which was Ms. Graham's
Okay.
initial complaint, but the one on April 11th.
Okay, go ahead.
And the question was, that was signed by you, Daniel Smith, and Sammy Graham, correct?
That is correct.
All right. What was your involvement in the development of that complaint?
There was no involvement in it. It's an ongoing complaint that probably stemmed from 2022 concerning USB drives. We'd already submitted complaints on that before, and this is basically another complaint filed in 23 that concerned USB drives. And in this case, Sammy presented it.
So were you involved in the discussions of developing the content of that?
No, I was not.
Okay, thank you. So how would you characterize Daniel Smith's involvement with the complaint?
Say again?
So again, the April 11th complaint, how would you characterize Daniel Smith's involvement with the complaint?
Which complaint?
The April 11th one that was filed that went before the Elections Commission.
We were all at the table. It was presented. We all read it. It looked good to us. It looked like good IT policy, and we signed it.
All right. So to your knowledge, had Mr. Smith seen the quoted language before it was presented to him on this complaint?
Not that I'm aware of.
And do you understand Mr. Smith to have talked to any municipality of Anchorage employees about the policy or complaint?
No.
I would just like the record to be clear. It's very difficult for you, my client, to answer questions about what's in Mr. Smith's head. And those questions seem to be asking for information that's in his head. My client can only testify as to conversations he might have had, but not what he's thinking.
No, and I didn't ask at all what was Mr. Smith thinking. Thank you, though, Mr. Cole. I think the questions are, do you know if he talked to anyone, which is a question about observation, not a question about what was in his head. So I appreciate your
I
perspective.
just want to clarify.
Yeah, I'm not asking for what you believe was in his head. I'm asking, did you see him have conversations with other municipal employees about the policy or complaint?
No.
All right, thank you. So now we're going to move on to first questions about first involvement with the USB. So you've submitted to us a record from 2022. The complaint quoted from an ITD policy statement. The 2023 complaint quoted from an ITD policy statement regarding USB drives. You recall that?
I recall the complaint that Sammy originally, I believe it was on the 6th, was the first complaint concerning that.
Right, and that, no, but not on the 6th, on the 11th, that complaint quoted from an ITD policy statement, right?
I don't know if that was the actual policy, but what she quoted appeared to be very good policy.
All right.
If wherever that came from, that was good policy.
When was the first time you saw that language?
I saw that the day that Sammy had the complaint on the table,
So that
and
would
we
have
were
been,
discussing that complaint, and we read that and signed it.
all right, thank you. So did you have any earlier conversations with any municipal employee about election staff use of the USB drives? And if yes, who?
Not specific to USB drive, but I went to lunch with Mark Dahl. It's the only person on your list that I've ever had any conversation with.
Was that before or after the submission of the complaint?
I don't recall whether it was. We went to lunch.
Thank you. So
Include that. Okay.
yeah, the
I went,
2022.
can you repeat that question?
Sure,
again?
I'll ask it. Did you have any earlier conversations with any municipal employees about election staff and the use of USB drives? And I think
Yes.
your attorney's got a good point.
2022 and 2023.
And so what municipal employees did you discuss the complaint or the USB issue with?
I didn't discuss the complaint at all with anybody.
Even the 2022 complaint?
That's correct.
So did you discuss with an election staff the 2022 complaint?
Yes.
Those are municipal employees. Are there any other municipal employees you might have
No.
discussed?
No, other than the fact we fill these out and we give them to their liaison,
Right.
and then they present it to election staff.
Did you ever talk with Mr. Dahl before your lunch about USB drives?
No.
All right, thank you. So again, thank you for bringing copies of this 2022 complaint. It's very helpful. So next questions are interactions with Municipality of Anchorage employees. And I think we kind of got to this relating to the first involvement with USB issues, but we'll go through these questions again. Did you ever talk to municipal staff before or after 11th of April, other than Mark Dahl, about concerns relating to the 2023 election?
Okay, repeat that question.
Right. So you've already said you had conversations with Mark Dahl about it. So, but did you ever talk to municipal staff before or after April 11th about election concerns relating to the 2023 election?
No.
Well,
That's
Are you, I mean, he filed 3 complaints. Is that what you're talking about in the 2023 election? Are you talking about those interactions? He filed 3 separate ones.
So that's news to me. I don't have those complaints, so I'm interested in that. We can maybe get those afterwards. So I wasn't talking about those specifically. What I was asking were just general questions. Did you engage with municipal employees on or after or before elections concerns relating to the 2023 election?
Well, everybody who's in the election room is a municipal employee. So if he filed those 3 complaints at some point, he had interactions.
yes.
I think that's a true statement you just made for your client. And your client just answered on the record, yes. So a couple of follow-up questions. Again, you mentioned you did speak with Mark Dahl. What about Mark Merchant?
No.
What about Dave Bronson?
No.
What about Bryce Wilbanks?
No.
What about Sammy Graham?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So now interactions with Mark Dahl. You mentioned previously that you did meet with Mark Dahl. You know him?
Do I know Mark Dahl? Yes, I do.
So how do you know him?
We worked together. I've known Mark Dahl for close to 40 years, 45 years. We worked together for the state of Alaska in IT. My specialty is data communications. And that's how we knew each other. We know each other through aviation circles. We're both pilots. I believe Mark flew commercially. I flew a little commercial. And there's another common denominator here that we discuss. And that's over lunch. But if you want to hear that, I'll let you know that too.
No, I don't think I need to be that specific.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to tell you anyway.
Sure.
Mark Dahl and I have a very common issue. His daughter has cancer.
Right.
And it's severe, and he's dealing with that. My daughter had cancer, and I had to deal with that. So Mark and I have a lot to talk about when it comes to issues with our daughters.
Thank you. And did you ever discuss with Mr. Dahl your concerns about the election?
Yes,
When?
during our lunch.
That's the only time?
That's the only time I talked to him.
And what was the substance of that conversation?
I asked Mark Dahl, I said, Mark, there doesn't appear to be any IT oversight at the election center. And that's the question I asked him. His response was, John, they don't want us in there. They don't like it when we show up. They do not want us in there. And that's the end of the conversation. And I asked that same question in 2022, and I asked the same question in 2023.
Thank you. So did you know that the ITD policy statement quoted in the April 11th complaint had originated with Mark Dahl?
No, I did not.
Thank you. So the ombudsman's report notes that on April 12th, Mr. Dahl picked you up at the Election Central at 11:27 a.m. and returned you to Election Central at 1:12 p.m. Do you recall that?
No, but I don't recall the dates.
All right.
Can you repeat that question once more?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So the ombudsman's report notes that on April 12th, Mr. Dahl picked you up at the Election Center at 11:27 a.m. and returned you to Election Central at 1:12 p.m.
That was our lunch.
Okay, so then
That would have been our lunch.
yeah, it's the likely circumstances. That's the date and time of your
Right.
lunch. That's the day after the complaint was filed.
Okay.
So now you've already described my next question. Why did Mr. Dahl come to get you? That's relating to all of the things you previously discussed. So I think we've kind of answered those questions. At the lunch, did you actually discuss USB drives?
No, I did not.
All right. So how would you characterize Mr. Dahl's involvement in the April 11th complaint?
I can't characterize Mark's. I can't characterize that. He has a job to do. He's the IT director for the municipality.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. Are you aware of any discussions Mr. Dahl had with MOA employees relating to the April 11th complaint before or after it was filed?
We probably talk to the liaisons and we talk about stuff like that.
Listen to what the question was. He's asking if you know about any other conversations he had with other employees.
Mark, are you referring to Mark Dahl?
Yeah.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. I think that's the last question about Mark Dahl. Next, and we're almost done. So we just need to get these things on the record. So when you signed the April 11th complaint, did you believe that the ITD policy was a muni-wide policy applicable to elections?
I would think so, yes.
And had you read before April 11th the language of the policy?
No, I have not seen that policy. Matter of fact, in the original complaint, Jamie had listed in there and said that they perform per IT policy. We
So
never saw that policy.
Right,
It was
we-
not presented.
I want to clarify
So
something.
I don't know that.
For some reason, there's this legend that Miss Hines said there was a policy. She said it wasn't a policy that she cited. I forget what the exact term was, a process or a practice, IT practice. So I want to put in the record here just for now that it's not a policy that she was quoting as a practice. So we heard that in 3 of these meetings, it's being called a policy. So when did you learn that, or did you come to learn that the ITD policy was not an official MOA-wide policy?
I had no idea.
But now you do?
I learned that from the newspaper on the articles they were printing on the issues with the,
Thank you. So the April 11th complaint was handwritten by Sammy Graham. When did you first become aware she was working on it?
repeat that?
So on the April 11th complaint was handwritten by Sammy Graham. When did you first become aware she was working on that?
By the fact that she issued the original complaint on the 6th. And that's a continuation of the rebuttal concerning the original complaint.
So sometime between the 6th and the 11th, you learned she was working on an additional complaint.
It's not an additional complaint. It's a continuation of the one that wasn't adequately addressed, is what my opinion.
Right. But when did you learn she was working on that document, however you want to frame it, the one for April 11th?
The day we signed it.
So April 11th. Thank you. So, and you already mentioned, I believe, that it just came to your attention because you were together in the
Yes.
room.
Yes.
So Did Miss Graham tell you where she got the policy?
No.
So what did she tell you about the complaint?
She didn't tell me anything. She had written it out and she asked to look at it. We read it. It made sense and we signed it. I signed it. It made perfect sense to me
All right.
based on my particular expertise.
And the last questions that are going to come from me, unless others rise up, are, do you understand, Ms. Graham, to have talked to any municipal employees about the policy or the complaint?
Not that I know of.
And are you aware of any discussions Ms. Graham had with MOA employees related to the April 11th complaint before or after it was filed?
No.
All right, so those are the questions I have just to set a benchmark for our inquiry. And now there are some other questions that might happen now. Ms. Salatel?
Thank you. For the 2023 complaints, the April 6th and April 11th one, so you signed the April 11th complaint. After you signed the complaint, did you bring up the issue with anyone, not including election center staff, to talk about it?
No.
Okay. After it was heard by the Canvas Board, did you follow up on your concerns that you presented in the complaint?
Yes, we had concerns.
Yes, but did you follow, so the Canvas Board heard you all and didn't, and denied the complaint, went ahead and recommended certification of the election. Did you follow up after that point on the concerns you raised in the complaint?
That's not our job to follow up. Our job is observers. We bring them forward, and then when they end from there, that's the job of the municipality and the assembly to do what they have to do. That's not my job or job to follow up on any of this.
So as a resident of the municipality, you didn't raise your concerns further with Mr. Dahl?
No, not at all. Mr.
Okay.
Dahl is
And you didn't raise your concerns further with your own assembly member?
no.
Okay, and you didn't raise your concerns any further with the mayor or any of his
No.
staff? Okay,
No.
thank you.
All right, does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Henry? So I am not seeing any more questions. So I believe at this time we can consider your subpoena fulfilled. Thank you for coming here.
Is it possible for me to ask a couple of questions so that there would be a little bit more completeness on this record that's before you?
Yeah, sure. What we're not doing here today is an investigation of
I
the
understand that. I
USB
heard you.
policy.
Yep.
But otherwise, that's fair game. We will get to that as folks want to know during a Title 28 update of the code. We'll have public hearings and process.
I will keep it
Thank you.
refined. So
Mr. Hurt,
Just real quick, I just want to clarify that the purpose of this is not to delve into the personal details of anybody's life. It's
Nope.
a specifically
It's not.
legislative purpose, and I just want to make sure we aren't going to, we already touched on a topic earlier that I believe Mr. Henry volunteered and was not being asked by the assembly, and I want to make it clear that that's not the purpose of this inquiry, to go into the details of anybody's personal life.
it's not.
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Mr. Cole, you have the floor.
Mr. Henry, could you explain a little bit about your background and employment history and why you had concerns in 2022?
My background is in IT. I spent years with IBM, 3 years with IBM working with them. I was hired by the state of Alaska as a communications specialist. Our job was to maintain the state of Alaska IT network, IP network throughout the state. We took care of all aspects of it. We took care of the maintenance of it, the design, the implementation, and the troubleshooting of all issues and problems with the state of Alaska network. I did this for 22 years. When I went to the elections as an observer, and I was a volunteer to do this, I brought to the table what I thought was a skill set of observation that I could make some observations concerning the elections and issues that I thought were problems. And the first thing that came up was issues with communications in the election center. The second issue that came up was the use of USB drives and access to a live vote center, live election server by a vendor who is inside the cage and nobody's allowed to go in there. The question that comes to my mind is, where are the IT professionals to come forth and say, okay, how come there was no IT notification? How come?
Mr. Cole.
Okay. So did you filed a complaint in 2022
That's correct.
and it was addressed in 2022, right?
Yeah, they addressed it. all
Was
right.
it to your satisfaction?
No, not.
Did you feel it was your job to do anything more after that?
No, not really. I already did my job by the observation and the submittal of the complaint.
And why did you send a copy of your complaint to Mr. Dahl in 2022?
Because my concerns that there were no IT involvement in decisions made by the election folks. So I sent him a copy. I just said, Mark, have you seen this? And I sent him a copy of my complaint concerning the server and the access of the server by the Dominion maintenance folks.
Did you have any other communications with him about that afterward?
No,
Let's go to 2023. Did you make the same observations in 2023 as far as the USB?
yes, basically, Sammy Graham brought it up. We had already brought it up before in 2022. Sammy brought it up and it was like, okay, Sammy, write it up. She wrote it up. They were responded to it. We signed it. And then we went to the election
After,
canvas.
yeah, but she wrote it up. And then did you see a copy of the response that was received from the municipality?
Yes, that was the one to the
Ms.
original.
Hines?
Yeah, Ms. Hines, I did see that.
And were you aware of any municipal IT practices related to USBs at that time?
No, I was not.
Did you make any other inquiries after that about the IT policies?
No, I didn't because Sammy already had written it down. So that was, I didn't need to double check her work. I didn't think I needed to.
And you were asked questions about whether you followed up on the complaints in 2023, right? You remember those questions?
Oh boy, I don't.
Well, okay.
I'm just trying to think what's going through my mind right now is the session of canvas. And when we were at session of canvas, who was it? Not Mark. One of the commissioners at the canvas stated specifically that, because we had presented information about the USB drive, and he said, the USB drive, he says, here we are again addressing the USB drive in 2023.
Did you have any other interaction with any administrative officials other than Mr. Dahl during this whole time?
No.
That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. That was really the gist, sir. And I just want to say thank you. You got the term practices right. You might not master the microphone real quick, but you got the language right. And I really appreciate it because there's a significant difference. And so again, thank you. I don't have additional questions. I think that we consider the subpoena fulfilled at this time. And this will be round 3. There is one more question. Mr. Myers.
My question really isn't for Mr. Henry
Okay,
or his
so you're-
representative. It was more
Thank
about
you.
the practices, since we've
Yep.
heard this multiple times.
Right.
If we can get an understanding, at least me on the body, of what the practices are,
Absolutely.
and maybe for the general public.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is an actual IT issue. The IT department has those practices identified. So that will come as we begin to review the security issues relating to conversations about the election. This process, no, thank you very much, is very much about the process of the complaint. We'll get to the conversation about the content. I would like to say on the record that the IT staff, in fact, does provide services for the election staff, but they do it at the request of the election staff and in their lane. And so it's not that we don't want IT staff in the elections department. It's that there is a chain of command and order and a process, and that the elections are in the purview of the assembly through the clerk to the elections. And so at this point, are there questions members want to bring up for discussion? We have a little bit of time left. Again, this is all in creating a record as we get forward to coming up with a report on what happened and where we go from here. Ms. Zalatil.
Thank you. You know, I've really been thinking about, since Ms. Graham was here and Mr. Henry was here, kind of what we do. So, right, the election happens, it's a really intensive time, and then we don't really evaluate things again until the following the late year, the following year, right? And what I heard from both Miss Graham and Mr. Henry was they didn't really feel any need to, or that once they made their complaints and the canvas board finished with them, that was that. And there feels like there's a disconnect between these various processes. If there's truly a complaint and a matter to take up, how do we, and this is something I want us to think about, is how do we make sure we're getting the opportunity earlier, perhaps, instead of just in our typical Title 28 rewrite, or how do we start that process sooner? So I've been really thinking about not just the substance of Title 28, but the process around those Title 28 rewrites. So I guess it's not a question, but just I think it's good to be transparent to kind of about where my head is as we contemplate, not only what might go into Title 28, but the process in which we address Title 28, because we've been talking a lot about process lately. Thanks.
Anyone else? Hearing and seeing none, the holiday weekend commences. We are adjourned.